Welcome to what is part of our project, Tools for Requirements Gathering and Management session. This is in the conference track, Process Excellence. Zach Jarrard is the speaker presenter, and he is currently the president of Jarrard Consulting, holds 3 master's degrees, and is an ASQ senior member, past chair of the ASQ Kansas City section, and currently serving as our QMD secretary. I am Ellen Quinn, the current chair of QMD and your moderator for today. Little housekeeping. This track session is only 45 minutes in length. Questions and answers will be at the end. Please enter any of your questions into the chat. And if we don't get a chance to answer all of them, Zach will have his contact information and you can email him afterwards. Thank you. Over to you, Zach.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the introduction. It's good to see everyone on this session, or if you're watching the recording. And with that being said, we'll start off with looking at all this stuff about requirements. So for our session, first we'll explore the purpose. So why have requirements in the first place? Then I'll share some tools that can help with gathering and managing requirements in both a waterfall or traditional project management environment, and then I'll also touch on Agile. And then I'll share some lessons that I've learned from doing business analysis and requirements management on various projects I've worked on. So to start off, you might wonder, well, where do requirements come from and where does all this start? Um, a simple way to think about that is a business need. And you probably hear about this in your organizations. You might hear people say, hey, we have this process that is outdated, or hey, we see people are doing stuff with AI. Maybe we should try that too and get an enterprise AI tool. It starts with the business need, and that could be some kind of problem. So it's an issue the organization is facing, or it could be an opportunity, perhaps a new market or new market share to try to break into. And this is the earliest point where you might get some requirements, but they'll be at a very high level. They won't be super technical at this point. And some stuff to think about as you're looking at business need and refining it. You want to make sure you have the right people in the room discussing it, so get stakeholder input. Make sure that this is a priority, so your organization is not building a bridge to nowhere. And then recognize that depending on the problem or opportunity, the business need might have perhaps a larger scale, so there might be kind of sub needs or problems under it, or it might be very narrow. So it might be perhaps a very specific problem that won't require a lot of resources to ideally resolve. So once you've fleshed out your business need, then we get to the business case. So assuming we have a good understanding of the need, now we can go out and we can develop our business case, which is the why. So we have some kind of problem or opportunity. We go to folks and we're like, this is why we picked this over something else or other stuff that's on our backlog. And just like the business need, it's also prioritized by our leaders and organizations. So they recognize that said problem or opportunity needs to be addressed soon. And some best practices to think about with regards to developing a strong business case. You want to think about your measures of success. So let's say that problem was solved. What are the metrics you could have to help support that or show it was solved? It's really common to develop a elevator pitch. So if you talk to someone at the organization, they had no idea what was going on with your project or whatever you were working on, in 30 seconds, you could explain it to them and say, this is what we're doing, this is why it's important, here's where we're at this point. And that's important as you go throughout a project to remind the organization about why they did it. Because at the beginning, they'll probably remember, but then let's say it's 6 or 12 months later, 18 or months or 2 years later, they might forget or there might be other stuff that comes up. So it's okay to occasionally remind them about why they selected said project or work to deliver. And then we get into our project. So assuming we've got a strong business need and a business case, then we can move toward our project and start kind of developing more requirements. And just a high level definition of what a project is, it's something temporary. So it's not a bridge forever that's being built. It has a start and a end date that's defined at the beginning, or at least you have some idea of when it'll start and end. And then you've got deliverables that are very clear and obvious. So we're going to implement a new system, do this digital transformation. At the end, we'll have the new system, the old one will go away. That's an example of high-level deliverables. And some best practices to think about as we're developing our project plans, we're getting ready to gather requirements. You want to make sure you take another look at the business need and business case, make sure that's well understood. Work with your stakeholders to define the scope. So that's the stuff that falls within the project, so the work the team will do. And then the work that the team is not going to do or your out of scope items. And then be ready for scope creep because you probably have coworkers that come in and are like, hey, I have this idea, or we're getting this new shiny system. Does it have this button and that button? Scope creep is fairly common. As long as you have a process to manage it, and then you're willing to say, hey, this sounds great, but let's do it later, or let's get through this first and then maybe add it in the future, then you should be fine. And that brings us to requirements. So the kind of the title of this session. So as we think about requirements, it's some kind of item within the work that's being delivered that will help that work or stakeholders be successful. And it could be some kind of feature. So we need the system to function a certain way. There might be some specific technical requirements. So looking more on the function side. So this system needs to talk to that one. Or it could be some kind of task. We're getting a new system. We need it to be able to process payroll properly, or we need it to process our expense report and stakeholders pick it. So you go to the stakeholders, they say, hey, this is what we need. And then you put that in the plan and make sure you track it so you can execute on it. And some items to think about as we're developing our requirements. It's really important to have that shared understanding. So the project team and stakeholders know what requirements are in that plan. You want to have it linked to the scope. So make sure those requirements fall within the work that's being done and then keep your team focused because scope creep will eventually happen. You'll have folks try to throw stuff in, and it might not be with a bad intention. You might have folks that are like, hey, there's this problem. Let's help these people too. But we have to recognize that you can always do that later. But if you don't get the work done you're committed to, then you can't solve that other problem that's hanging out there. And requirements can come from a lot of different places. Your stakeholders are one source. The customers that work with the organizations, another. Could be regulations, suppliers. There might be standards like ISO or ANSI. Even from your project management office. So your folks that are helping deliver the project, they might have requirements around the plans they have to deliver and so on, or their expectations. And there's a lot of different types of requirements as well. So looking at the functional sides, you've got business. So we need the system to do ABC so we can get some kind of value from it. Technical, we need this system to integrate or talk to that system and also this system and this other one. Transition is another one. So if you have your current state, so you have this problem or opportunity you're trying to pursue, and your end state is solving that problem or breaking into that market, there's a gap that's your transition. So it could be training materials, getting people ready, so communication planning, could also be turning off the old system or moving away from that legacy process or whatnot that you had. And then there's non-functional requirements as well. So from a process standpoint, we need the system to have this many steps or approvals in it. The business environment is another one. So if you have changes or whatnot, you're incorporating that. And then regulatory. So we have to follow rules. And sometimes requirements can be interesting. I had one project I worked on um, doing a joint marketing campaign with a dog shelter. And so we had this AI we were working on, and we had to turn it into Bark University and add all these bark sounds to it. And then from a regulatory standpoint, there might be strange regulations you have to follow. So one example, when I was in Missouri Boys State, I went and traveled to different cities, and one of them, they had an ordinance where you had to dance in a construction zone. So I went and walked in their city. I'm like, well, they're probably not going to enforce this, or I don't feel like dancing. And of course, one of their quote unquote police saw me and they're like, well, hey, you're not dancing in our construction zone. So I went to a judge and they were like, do you have anything to say? I'm like, I just want to go home. So I paid a fine. And then the next time I went through, I made sure to dance in the construction zone. So I met the regulatory aspect. And there's a lot of tools we can use for gathering requirements. So doing brainstorming sessions, that's one. So thinking of all the different ideas out there. Interviews, that's more for perhaps one-on-one or maybe folks that are kind of shy. Focus groups, so if you have a larger group, perhaps your project team or certain stakeholder groups, you could bring them together and have structured conversations. And there's also various visual tools as well. So you could develop a prototype of the deliverable and show it to people and say, hey, is this what you're thinking? Is there other features or functions or tasks missing? Mind map is another one. So thinking about how the project or the deliverable interacts with different systems or perhaps with the organization as a whole. And then affinity diagram. So that goes really well with brainstorming. So you get all these ideas and then you pull them together or try to group similar ideas. So you can look at perhaps trends or similarities between different functions or what different stakeholders say. And then these are some questions to think about. So as you're talking to stakeholders, it's really important to kind of dive deeper into those requirements. So the first part, understanding why it's important, what they're expecting. So if this requirement's delivered, here's the value they're expecting from it. And then how it will support the project as a whole. So maybe you have to do this requirement to be able to deliver the next one and so on. And then some other questions is you're developing the project. So in software, for instance, there's usually a lot of testing. So thinking about who needs to be involved with testing or inspecting said deliverables. Also giving some consideration to if training's required. So you put this new system out there that solves a problem or opportunity. Do people need to be trained on how to use it? And then also giving some thought to deployment. So you do all this great work, you put this project stuff together. Eventually, you have to put it out there for people to use it. So thinking about what that looks like. And then also your post-deployment support. So once you have it out there on day one or the first week, how are you going to support it beyond that first week or initial deployment? And then validation. It's great to build stuff, but you have to make sure it meets the requirements or specifications. And this often involves stakeholders doing some inspections of different deliverables, so making sure it's what they wanted, looking to make sure it meets requirements, and then seeing if there's concerns. Maybe there's some risks that need to be addressed. Maybe there's stuff missing. Maybe there's requirements that they thought of later in the project that they have to add to the deliverable. So that would be a change request. And some best practices, just as we think about who needs to be in the room for our business need, our business case development, and then requirements gathering, we still want to have some of those same stakeholders involved with validation as well. And then if there's any defects or issues, we want to have those documented and tracked, and then have a plan to try to resolve those. And then we want to follow up. So if there's additional testing, additional questions, we're not leaving those out in a vacuum. We're getting those resolved pretty quickly. And then there's change control. So it's inevitable you might get changes or requirements thrown out or stuff added in that people request. So you want to have some structure for how to process those. And the goal of the change control board that you have on your project or your organization is to review these requests. And in an ideal world, that would include your sponsor, so the person providing resources for this project, your various stakeholders, your project team as well, or at least some of them. And as much as possible, you want to be careful about change. You want to try to limit the amount of changes that are approved to the projects. If you have too many requirements or changes get added later on, then you might not be able to deliver the original work. And then what happens is people get frustrated and then they're like, hey, we're going to pull the plug. And then you go back to your business needs. So you have this problem or opportunity that's still hanging around that you haven't solved. And some best practices to think about with regards to change control. You want to make it clear what's needed when folks submit a change request. So it might be the business case. So why is this requirement being added late? What's the scope of work? What are the resources or the cost estimate to help deliver it? Who would need to be involved to get it done? You want to share the process for reviewing changes as well so people know what that looks like. And then you want to follow up. So if someone submits a request, if it's approved, you want to let them know why it was approved and what the next steps are. If it's not approved, you still want to do that follow up. And that way you get some closure. So that way you don't have stakeholders that are hanging around or feeling confused about why they didn't hear back about their request. And then there's also requirements for Agile as well. So just at a high level, in case you're not familiar with Agile, this is a series of methodologies that focus on doing quick value delivery. So within 2 to 4 week cycles, could even be, up to 12-week cycles. And there's a greater emphasis on being open to change, being flexible, bringing in new ideas, having our team be involved, so having folks be self-organized. And at a high level, your agile project structure, you'll have that vision. So it's kind of that broader 10,000-foot level of what success will look like. That's about 1 to 2 years, could be 3 years. Then you've got releases that are in about 3 to 6 month chunks. And then your iterations that could be as short as a week. And depending on the methodology you use, it could go up to perhaps 12 weeks at a time. So kind of like sub releases. And within Agile, there's this concept called stories that is very important. And this is how they capture and document requirements. And the goal of stories is you're trying to understand what the customer end user wants. So from delivering some function, what are they going to get out of it? And it pulls together the persona, so the person that wants the request or that submitted it, the function, so the what or what's being delivered, and then the business value they get out of it. And you can take stories, you can break them down further. There are even some stories that are so big, they're called epics. And so with those, you want to kind of add more sub-level stories so you can capture all the tasks that need to be done or requirements. So one example, I have a couple listed here, but as an ASQ member, most of you are probably members or future members. You want to get recertification units. So that way you can renew or maintain certifications you've got. And with that one, we could break that down further into sub-stories. One might be as an ASQ member, I want to attend a virtual conference so I can uh, learn from excellent speakers and not have to travel. So you're saving money and getting to attend this stuff and getting the recordings. So again, that's one example of kind of breaking down a story into a smaller piece. And within Agile, they really emphasize using Kanban boards. And I found these to be really helpful. You can use it to visualize your workflow. So you usually have buckets. So you've got to do, so all the stuff the team needs to work on, doing, stuff that's in progress, and then you've got done, so functionality that's delivered or deliverables that are complete. And it helps track team progress. So you can go to one place or a dashboard if a manager asks, well, hey, how are you guys doing on this initiative or this agile work? You can go and say, well, this stuff hasn't started, but we have a plan to do it, or we ran into obstacle. This stuff's being worked on, and then this stuff is done. So folks can start testing it or whatnot. And there's a lot of digital tools that can help with Kanban boards. So Trello is one that I've had a lot of experience with. Asana is another big one, and then Jira. But these are all digital tools. Now, you can't have an in-person Kanban board, The only issue is if you have a remote or hybrid team, they might not be able to see it. And then you might have people tamper with it. So when I developed my first Kanban board, it was in person, and we had this poster board taped on a wall. And we had it up for a couple days, and then I came into work and it was tore down, it was thrown in the trash. There were some facility folks that unintentionally threw it away. So we put it back up, but when I put up the second time, I put a sign under it. I said, "Beware of dog. Do not touch the board." But eventually we moved to Trello, and then having that digital board helped solve that issue of trying to manage a in-person one. And then there's various ceremonies within Agile as well. The story writing workshop. So these are facilitated sessions where you can gather requirements. This is an opportunity to bring your various stakeholders together and help them develop the various agile stories. And then you follow that framework. So I'm gonna hop back for a second. So the general framework is as a, and that's the person or the stakeholder the functionality is being developed for. I want, and that's whatever the function is or what they want the software, the deliverable to do. So I can, and then after the can, you have the value or the business value they want. And I think the cool part is the story framework can be used in a lot of different places. So right here, so another example, as a customer, and this is implying at a bank or financial institution. I want to use an app, so some kind of mobile banking app to help manage money. And then looking at kind of a government example as a citizen, so as someone that falls within some kind of city, state, province, or country, they want to recycle, so they want to try to be eco-friendly, so that way they can help the environment. So again, those are kind of a few examples of stories, and they show kind of the broad application of them to different types of work. So I'm going to hop back. And then with the story writing workshops, they can vary. So some of the ones that I did, they were maybe an hour or two, but you could have some that take perhaps 4 to 8 hours. But again, it varies on kind of the team you're working with and how mature they are with Agile and these practices. And then as you have your team doing the work within an Agile cycle, near the end, you'll have what's called a iteration review. So this is a chance for your team to do a demonstration or show a prototype of what they developed within their 2 to 4 week or 12-week cycle. And it's an opportunity to bring stakeholders together and show them what was delivered and go through questions. And then out of that, oftentimes there are new stories that are developed, and those are added to the backlog or the list of all the work requests. Now, one of the important points to mention, though, with the iteration review is that that is not a time where your prototype is modified. So you're not having your team change a lot of stuff. It's really just to gather feedback. And then from getting that feedback and that new set of stories, then during the next cycle or the next couple cycles, the concerns that were brought up, they would be addressed at that point. They wouldn't be addressed right in that individual session. And then there's a couple of key roles to mention in Agile that relate to requirements. One of them is the product owner. So this person, typically they're a mid or upper level manager, and they're the visionary. So they're the one that often helps develop that broader vision for the project or the work that's being delivered. And they help set priorities for the team. So they'll review the backlog, so all the work requests, and they'll say, hey, out of all the requests we have, we're going to focus on these 2 or 3 requests for the next 2 weeks or so. And they also represent stakeholders. So they might be involved with your iteration review. They can help bring in various stakeholders, also knock down obstacles. So if your team's trying to deliver on some of these requirements and they're having issues, the product owner and sometimes the scrum master, they'll work together to help knock those down. And then you have the scrum master, and this is a person, they help get rid of obstacles and report them. And that comes from your daily stand up. So during a agile cycle, each day you'll have what's called a daily stand-up. So you'll have your team come together, and each person will go through what they did the previous day, what they're doing today, and then what obstacles they've run into. So anytime they someone brings up an obstacle, the Scrum Master will be the one to help address that or at least escalate it to the right party. The Scrum Master also helps facilitate the agile process. So going from the beginning of an iteration up to the end. And then they're the servant leader. And you're probably thinking, well, what is a servant leader? Um, in a general sense, it's someone that's supposed to help your team out. They're looking out for the interests of their team members and the organization. They're not necessarily self-serving, but you want to bear in mind that can mean a lot of different stuff. So, an example from my time as a Scrum Master, I got to help order a balloon for a project I was working on. I got to help with testing. I helped develop a student organization. So, my point being that there's a lot of work that could fall within that servant leader aspect of being a Scrum Master. And then a couple examples just to briefly highlight. One that relates to requirements. So earlier this year, I helped deliver some project management professional prep courses. In case you're not familiar with the PMP, it's a certification in project management. So I worked with a organization and defined the requirements. So what they wanted to get out of the sessions. It ended up being 40 hours of training. So it was 5 sessions. They were each 8 hours for about once a week. And I helped develop and deliver the course. And then I remained open to change. So folks would ask me to send slides early, so I started doing that. I would add um, stuff about ASQ, for instance, or associations, or answer other questions that at times might be slightly unrelated to the PMP, but again, trying to help folks on their project management journey and some of the key outcomes that I had. So from doing a good job managing the requirements, trying to exceed expectations, the students felt like they were ready for the exam. I gave them some case studies that were based on my experience and then supplemental materials to help them along their way. And then we had fun. One of the requirements, so an example of something non-technical that's quality related, I brought snacks. So it wasn't in our original agreement, but I thought, well, hey, if people are thirsty, if they're hungry, they're probably not going to listen. So I brought snacks and, people loved it. I made jokes too. So I had one example about the junior barking officer at my company. So I pulled up the dog, and they all agreed since I was babysitting the dog that I should get a consulting fee for that, which I didn't, but I got a lot of emotional value because I was babysitting the dog at the time. And then another example, so one of the agile projects I worked on was developing a Amazon Alexa skill, and I served as the Scrum Master on this project. So I got to help gather stories from pretty much every stakeholder at the organization at the time. I helped them develop and maintain a digital Kanban board. So initially it was that in-person board, and then we moved to a digital one. And then I helped them flesh out requirements, so understand the subtasks and then estimates, so they could be able to put stuff in the right place in the certain iterations. And some of the key outcomes from that, we met and exceeded our customer requirements. So our stakeholders were happy. The team knew what was going on. So there was clear visibility into what was being worked on from senior leaders down to the team level. And then we successfully plan for future cycles and then successfully execute on them. And we had over 10,000 people from across the world use our skill. We even had the governor of Missouri test it out. And then I got to lead a student panel at an international conference on voice technology and AI, which was pretty cool. And so looking back, as I think about my time working in this space and requirements, as we think about managing requirements in general, you want to have that business analyst role defined. So that's the person that helps gather and then track requirements throughout your project lifecycle. If you have a bigger organization, you might have a separate business analyst that does that. In smaller organizations, you might have your project manager or maybe one person that's juggling a couple different hats take on that role. And then as you're going throughout your work that's being done or your project, you want to build, but then also maintain good relations with various stakeholders. So that way you can pull them in or have them help inspect stuff as needed. The validation is critical. It's great to build stuff, but we need our stakeholders to remember that we need them to come review it to make sure we're on the right track. And then in an agile environment, I also think in traditional projects too, to some extent, digital Kanban boards are super helpful, especially if you've got a virtual or hybrid team. You want to make sure if you're in that agile environment, you're following those ceremonies. If you deviate, that could throw off the flow of the project. And I found for organizations that are not mature with agile, using Scrum is kind of a good starting place because it's very out of the box and easy to use. And then you want to have your product owner be involved throughout your project. If you have them kind of get disengaged or uninvolved, it makes it hard to get that voice of the customer and the voice of the stakeholder needs in some of those agile cadences, like your iteration planning and then your iteration review. And here's some resources. So from Beyond Our Time Together, these are a couple of articles. If you reach out to me, I'm happy to send you the web links for them. They cover both traditional and agile projects as they relate to requirements. And then here are a couple books. So the book on Scrum by Jeff Sutherland's really good. It's more on the agile side. Barbara Karkenord. She has the PMI, so they have a professional business analysis certification. Their prep book is really good. The CMQOE handbook, so the Certified Manager of Quality, that's really good. And one point I should mention is that the editors for that happen to be at our conference. So if you have questions about that or other ASQ certifications, you can reach out to them. You can also reach out to other folks as well. I would also add the Certified Software Quality Engineer book is also really helpful for requirement stuff. And then some takeaways. So from our time together today, or if you're watching this recording, we've taken a look at the purpose of requirements. So starting from that business need up to validation of our deliverables. I shared some tools that you can use in small and large groups for gathering and managing requirements in both a traditional and also agile project or environment. And then I shared some lessons from my experience in this space. And just want to thank all of you for being here. If you're watching the recording, thanks for taking the time to listen to this session. I'd love to connect. I'm super active on LinkedIn. I'm also involved with ASQ, PMI, and some other groups. And just want to thank our moderators here. I want to thank Ellen for help making this possible and all the other conference volunteers, ASQ for supporting this, and then all of you for getting to attend this session. You saved me time from having to draw stick people in my room. There will be a roundtable after this, so if you have your question, make sure you hold on to it if I don't answer it. But you could email, you could reach out to me. I'll try to get back to you. I do some travel sometimes. I have zombie groups or alien groups that reach out to me. No, I'm just kidding. I don't work with aliens, but yeah, if there's a way I could help, just let me know.
Thanks, Zach. We actually have lots of questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We have one question is what kind of scope creep is good?
Okay, good scope creep. I would say if there's a critical requirement that might have been missed in your initial business analysis, that would be something good to add. I also think if there are quality requirements that are missed, like one example for websites or apps to have them be adaptive, so making it so their screen adjusts on different sizes or whatnot, that would be something good. But I think in an ideal world, if you've done your requirements gathering really well, that you would capture the bulk of your essential requirements on the front end. So ideally, you would avoid a situation like that. But I would say if you run into it, if you find something critical that's missing, let the sponsor know. and then try to get that to change control quickly so that way they have a chance to review it and then try to add it in scope.
Okay, thanks. Another question, are some requirements related to long-term support for a new system like upgrades, etc.?
I would say yes, those would fall under transition requirements. It might also be technical. If you have like a software, for instance, or a system, a part of the transition might be turning off the old system. So you might have a cutoff date where you say after this day, we're going to move away from this vendor and go toward this new one or new system. So yeah, to go back to the question, I would say it could be a mix of technical and then also transition requirements.
Okay, thanks. Another question, so do stories in Agile change original requirements or just modify them?
I would say the story framework, it's a way to capture the requirements, and the goal is to try to get a deeper insight into what the customer or the end user really needs and their problem. If you have an epic, so if you have a story that's really big, you might have to break that down into sub stories. And then within that, so on Trello, for instance, so if I had like a story listed, there's a way on there to list subtasks. I'm going to go back for a second. Let's see. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's do the ASQ story as an example. So you're trying to get RUs. So some of the tasks under that might be find out what is a RU, so what counts and what doesn't. Another might be look at events that could count for RUs. And then the next one might be look at how to report them. Those would be subtasks that help you deliver or meet the needs of that story.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, what advice do you have for people dealing with customers that think they're agile but aren't?
Okay, they think they're agile, but they're not. I would say for that one, it's probably good to do an overview of what the agile process is, and then work with them to uh, capture stories. I'm going to go back again. Okay. There we go. I would say this relates back as well to the story writing workshop. So bring a stakeholder group together, or perhaps you're doing an interview, and make sure it's clear on what an agile story is, and then the process to deliver that. So you have folks give you these stories, then they get prioritized, they get added in the backlog, then the product owner prioritizes them. And I would say for that stakeholder, if you're delivering their stuff, make sure you let them know to be like, hey, in 2 or 4 weeks, we're delivering this item. So that way you can get them in your iteration review meeting, or if you have other questions, you've got some lead time to be able to clarify. So I hope that helped, but if it didn't, come to the round table and we can talk more about that.
Okay, thanks, Zach. And we have, I want to thank Doug Wood added a lot of stuff in the chat. Thank you, Doug. Great explanations. Um, I'm going to make this one question. It's a long intro to it, but I'm just going to ask the question. How do you propose we can get the non-functional requirements implemented?
Okay, so how do we implement them? Um, I would say so you probably want to have, depending on the stakeholders, either have an interview or focus group and make sure it's clear on what those look like. And some of those might relate back to quality. So having the system go through a process a certain way or have a certain look and feel, be adaptive. Another one might be that's clearing a cycle time or something. So you might have like a process that took a long time and now we want it to take less time. So I would say defining that up front, and then when you're doing validation, make sure that you have the stakeholders that requested that help with reviewing the deliverables and then perhaps testing as well to make sure that they're getting what they need. So again, kind of a simple answer that question, but if you want to come to the round table, I'm happy to explore that further.
Thanks, Zach. And what are you going to be calling the roundtable? Is it just going to be what project
I
discussion?
think so. I think I just called it like project management discussion. So
Okay. Okay, they just look for you. And that if people aren't familiar with that, they go to the homepage and I think it's where is it under networking?
I think it's
And then
under roundtable. So there's a menu on the left. Here I'll pull it up real quick.
yeah, just to make sure, in case people aren't familiar with where that is, that would be great.
Okay, there we go.
Because we've got lots of people that are asking questions and it probably would be benefit if they could, ask them directly to you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And to be honest, I kind of discovered the roundtable stuff yesterday. All right, so we got our
Good.
menu here. Where is it? Ah, here it is. So you see this
Oh,
circle on
okay.
the left side,
Roundtables. Great. Okay,
and
good.
then you can also make one if you want. So if you want to bring a group of people together, if you're presenting, you can make one after your session. There's some other ones as well. One I should mention, CTHRM's been trying to do some stuff with CMQOE and our division, so feel free
Yep.
to join those as well.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday. Good. Great. I appreciate that. Okay, I think we have time for a couple more. Let me ask this one. What about duration estimation, the frequency, and who does the estimation?
Okay, so we're looking at estimates. I would say the stakeholders will work with the project team to do the estimates. Now, in a agile environment, they would use what's called planning poker. So that's where you bring your team together and you review each story. And as you do that, you have the team they call it Fibonacci numbers. So it'd be like 1, 3, 5, 7, or so on. And what you want to listen for is outliers. So if you have someone come back and they're like, well, hey, I think this is going to take a week. And then other people are like, yeah, this will take a week. And then one person says, oh, I think it's going to take 2 months to do this. That person that's the extreme outlier, you want to listen to what they have to say because they might have some insight into why the story or item discussed might take longer or less time than the team thought. And then you would re-estimate again. So you would take their input into consideration, and it's a way to help improve estimates. I would say the same also applies to traditional work as well. The key part is if you have people raising alarm bells, that something might take longer than expected, or you have a really broad requirement that needs to be broke down, I would encourage you to listen to that person and then work with the team to decide if their input is valid or not. Because sometimes it's not. You might have like a new person in your organization. They're nervous about estimates. Something that happens, it's called padding, where you have people add extra time to stuff. And if you add too much extra time, it makes it to where it's hard to get those deliverables out there if you're making your schedule too long.
Yeah, how true. Thanks, Zach. I think we're almost out of time, so I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, but I would recommend everyone join you at your roundtable and you can continue the discussion. I think you're starting it at 2 o'clock Eastern, correct?
Yes, I think I'm going to open it 5 minutes early, but feel free to
Okay.
join. Again, just want to thank everyone for attending this session. If you watch the recording, so we haven't forgot about you, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share copies of the slides. You can just email me or contact me on LinkedIn. And I'm also happy to share the links as well. But again, thanks for joining this session. I hope you've enjoyed the event so far, and feel free to continue to participate. And if there's ways I can help you or other folks, just let us know.
Thanks, Zach.
Yep, thanks
Everyone.
everyone. Hope you enjoy the event.